Hello and welcome everyone to the second Lucid Deep Dives discussion group. Today the topic is based off of the question presented, or essentially the controversial opinion presented originally by Frying Man, of lucidity is not a discrete, binary, all or nothing state, but rather more like a continuous function, dependent on many factors. So many of us found this quite fascinating, a topic that can bring up so much discussion. So that is the topic for today. Simplified to, is lucidity a binary state or a continuous function? So to kick the discussion off, I will go to Skyfall. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Lucidity is defined in, typically as knowing that you are dreaming while you're dreaming. Of course, there are, definitional misconceptions such as control being part of it or things along that line. But then actually determining what defines lucid awareness. Is lucidity a binary or is lucidity a spectrum? My answer is it's both. I use the analogy of a dimmer switch. If you've ever had a light switch that's sort of like a dimmer light switch, it adjusts in there's a spectrum of light that it can cast on a room. It can be bright, it can be dim, but there is a point when the light is on and there is a point when the light is off. The actual question of, is this dream lucid, is a yes or no question. You either got lucid in the dream or you did not. That is a binary state in that part. You either got lucid, yes, I got lucid, or you did not get lucid, no, I didn't get lucid. But there is ultimately a spectrum in that. So there are things like full non-lucidity, where you have no awareness at all. Then, a little bit of pre-lucidity, where maybe you're asking the question, or you're curious, or you're starting to notice things out of place, but you're not quite making that connection yet. And then there's like the low-level lucidity, where now at this point you are lucid. And so you've gone from not being lucid to being lucid, but there's still a spectrum of awareness here. And so your low-level lucidity, you know that it's a dream, but you don't really do much with it. You probably don't remember your dream goals or anything of that nature, but you do know it's a dream. And then you go up from there. You have sort of higher awareness, where you can start remembering dream goals, start remembering things, have better access to waking memories and to intentions. And then like full on awareness, everything is part of the dream. You're fully aware that every single thing there is part of the dream, including yourself, and full like metacognition in that sense. And likely to have better waking memory access. So there's a spectrum of awareness, but there's a point on that spectrum where you go from, okay, I'm not lucid, to, okay, I am lucid. There is a point where that line is crossed. And so I think the answer is both. It's a binary state and it's a spectrum. And hello, Red, welcome.
Yeah, hi, Red. I didn't really mention much about the panelists here, but we have some amazing opinions coming in for this discussion. So does anyone else want to jump in on this one?
I can go next. I have some thoughts. I pretty much agree with Skyfall that it's kind of both. I would lean more towards the spectrum with various aspects of that, like Skyfall said. The lucidity being the awareness itself is made up of a lot of factors, such as the level of memory that you have, the level of control that you have, although it's not defined by control, as we know. But that being said, like the spectrum of awareness, when you define was I lucid or was I not, when you're looking back at a dream, I think it can vary for everybody. And I think it's okay for everybody to kind of have their own definitions of like, yeah, I consider that lucid or semi-lucid, or no, I don't. So it's kind of hard to apply a certain yes or no criteria to universally. So I think personal, definition plays a role in it. But overall, I do think it is a spectrum. Because just last night, I was telling Night Owl earlier, I had a little bit of lucidity when I kind of realized, oh, something's a little off. That's not normal. But then I went right back into the dream and just said, oh, okay, well, whatever, So it didn't go past that. But then there are times where that leads me to full lucidity with full dream control and full memory of my waking life experiences and everything. And then there's sometimes where I'm fully lucid with no control or no memory of my, and it just kind of varies depending on all these different aspects at different levels, depending on the dream. So I definitely think it's a complex question, but I do love this topic.
Definitely. I find that a lot of the sorry, a lot of the question comes in with, you know, people being unsure about whether or not they were lucid, or even unsure in the dream, questioning. So that, to me personally, sort of signifies a higher level of awareness. But at a certain point of awareness, you probably do reach lucidity, in the sense that you do get so aware that you know that you are dreaming because you are aware of your state. And all the rest, I don't know, I won't go too far into awareness itself. But there's also the question of, like, you know, do we count sort of like beginning to become questioning or aware as like lucidity? And if not, you know, where does that actual point lie where you become lucid? Especially for those with bad recall, or even just with slightly imperfect recall, it can be hard to recall specific thoughts, which happened as well. So I recognize there's a lot of confusion around this that I usually see the case when the topic comes up. So I thought that's interesting. Does anyone else have anything to chip in on what Amina and Stifle have said? I'm gonna start calling on.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, DJ, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a few seconds for brains to kick in. So what I think about, a couple things that come to mind. The aspects of lucidity. So it's this thing where kind of revolves around knowing it's a dream, right? We talk about, like, a lucid dream is knowing that you're in a dream. So it's kind of revolves around this idea of knowing that you're dreaming. And I think maybe not all of us, but enough of us have had dreams of being lucid where we weren't actually lucid, like dreams about being lucid without actually being lucid. So there's this kind of line, this demarcation between knowing you're lucid and there's that's where I think there's some clear contrast. So um, that's what's really interesting to me about this particular subject is, you can have all these different aspects of lucidity, um, that you could count as a lucid dream if you wanted to, but um, I personally prefer a higher standard. But it's pretty simple to me. It's, do you know it's a dream? And so digging into that, how do you know it's a dream? What is it just a feeling? Is it a mind state? Um, is it the ability to do certain things? And so then you have, over the years, people have created what they call lucid criteria. You know, you've got the classic early YouTube lucid dreaming YouTuber, Reese Jones, who had a really well-known series of videos, the levels of lucidity. You know, there's a book called the SUNY. Is made by the SUNY Press, University in New York, and they did a book. I'm spacing on the name. I think it's On Dreaming or something like that. And they go into the criteria of lucid dreaming. If you Google that, criteria of lucid dreaming, and it's basically like what aspects are required for lucidity. And I think most people will say, well, it's just knowing that you're lucid, or sorry, knowing that you're dreaming. But there's also some that argue that other things should be necessary for it to be a lucid dream. Like, Paul Thole has his things where it's like awareness of waking memories, for example. So there does seem to be like this um, aspect of, okay, I know it's a dream, but you might know it's a dream without having waking memories. It's like how much of your conscious awareness needs to be online for it to be a lucid dream, right? So I really like thinking about that part where it's like what are you actually experiencing when we call it lucidity, when we have this clarity of mind. That's really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. And that's a question I think people have been tussling with for decades and are probably going to keep tussling with for decades. Honestly, it gets to a point, unless you clearly determine scientifically unless you can clearly isolate a brain state that separates lucidity from non-lucidity and do so like in a easy to verify way. Right now, like fMRI stuff, that's very expensive, very hard to do, and it's really hard to get people to sleep in there. The question's almost left to the realm of philosophy in a sense of, okay, well, what does it mean? How do you know if you know something or not? That is a metaphysics question. That is pure on kind of it's epistemology, maybe even like that. That's
Yeah.
metaphysics. You're getting into how do you know that you know something if you claim to know something, and that is a philosophical question at that point. But I think lucidity, there is a discrete point where yes, you are lucid, or no, you're not lucid. But lucidity can be like, you know, can vary. You can have very low level state, like Amina just talked about, like last night, having just, oh, you realized you were dreaming just briefly, but you didn't really do much with it. So very low level lucidity, you crossed the threshold, but you didn't really do much with it. Kind of like a suborbital flight. You're getting up there, but you're like not really going anywhere, but you got there just barely, but you're not really going anywhere. Versus like the higher level lucidity and that full awareness, there's a pretty big contrast between a low level lucid dream and like a full on, like a high level lucid dream. I would just say, of course, control. I don't include that in any type of spectrum of lucid awareness. I wouldn't include control anywhere in that, because control is ultimately a separate skill. And so being good at control doesn't necessarily mean you're more or less lucid. You can be poorly lucid and really good at control, or you can have, this really high quality, vivid, highly aware lucid dream and suck at control. Control and lucidity are different skills with almost like a different approach to them. One's about being aware of your environment, and the other is about changing how you perceive things and having sort of the self control. And they are different.
Does anyone else have anything to add? I mean, not everyone has been talking on this. Red, do you have anything? Or Night Owl, Mina?
I mean, I pretty much agree. I think, that question of like, do you know it was a dream or not? That is pretty like quite a simple way to define it, but it does get more complex than that. I mean, but if I think back to how I'm feeling in my lucid dreams that that are obviously considered lucid, there's always a moment where I'm like, oh yes, I know this is a dream. And so that knowingness, even of like all the other factors aside, I still would consider it lucid. And then I have a category like that I consider semi-lucid, which that's a whole other debate on whether you consider semi-lucid lucidity or not. It's on the same spectrum for me, but it's below the threshold of like you know a satisfying lucid dream for me, which is one of those where I'm like kind of aware, or I'm like suspicious that something's off, and I'm like, maybe this is a dream, but then I just get distracted by the dream and I don't reach that, don't pass that threshold of knowing it's a dream for sure. And then, it can change within the same dream. Like you could be fully lucid in a dream, and then later in the dream, you're just back to non lucidity. So it's so dynamic and it changes even within the same dream. And I don't know, in terms of like scientifically defining like an exact brain state that you consider lucid, I think that would be very difficult too, because I mean, it's even seen that you may even be not even just lucid dreaming in REM sleep. Like we can, not as likely, but we can lucid dream in non-REM sleep. So I feel like it definitely varies from person to person.
Yeah, sweet, definitely. Does anyone else have thoughts to add?
I had a quick thing if Red doesn't want to go. I have this guy Ed Kellogg so I was talking about like lucid criteria. A guy named Ed Kellogg created something he called the lucidity continuum. It's in Robert Wagner's book. I think it's Lucid Dreaming, Plain and Simple. And I mean, what you said reminded me of it, because he has a term he calls pre-lucid, and I think this term has been used before him, but he uses pre-lucid, sub-lucid, semi-lucid, and then lucid. And basically, he created these categories to describe particular things that we know kind of are precursors to lucidity that can be triggers for reality checks. Like a pre-lucid is like, I notice some sort of bizarreness. Sub-lucid is like, I vaguely realize that it's a dream, but it doesn't occur to me to act differently. So some of these are like personally, I prefer like strictly say, okay, if I know it's a dream, it's a lucid. And a big part of that is that I noticed that if I didn't see if I held my standard to a higher level of lucidity, I would get discouraged when I didn't get fully high level lucidity. So I kind of changed the bar for myself, so that I would have a better attitude about, and that basically just, you know, I got that from a dream yoga guy, and he's basically saying, value every piece of awareness that you get, because it just helps, I think. But yeah, and then he's like semi-lucid. He says, I know it's a dream. I still follow the dream script. So this is also like, I think in the online community, we have our own ways of looking at this. Like I think most people, these are very precise definitions for each one of these terms, where I think these terms are used a little bit more loosely for a lot of people, whereas a semi-lucid for a lot of people might just be, I wasn't fully lucid. I've seen that a lot. So, but yeah, I think these levels are useful. I hesitate. I don't like thinking of like a high level lucid as the ideal. That's kind of what I think, but I don't like looking at it that way for most people. I think most people find the most enjoyment in semi-lucids, actually. Well, at least according to this criteria, where the person is lucid, but they're following a script, or as people in some discords say, they're railed, right? They're on rails, and that seems to be the most enjoyable for people, where they are lucid, but they have minimal control, and they're following along a storyline. And I don't see, to me, that's a lucid dream. But yeah, so that also gets into some kind of gray area, because it's totally possible to develop a schema where your awareness is high enough to believe that you're lucid. But if you were to attempt anything outside of that thing, that schema that you're in, then you may not be able to do that. And of course, you could, if that was your kind of habit, you could, of course, break out of that intentionally. But it's really hard to tell if your schema is set, like you're a fish in water, right? And then also, like, everybody's self-reporting, so you just take it on. You take it on faith that this person was lucid when they say they're lucid. Anyway, I'm rambling a little bit. I just wanted to mention that the lucidity continuum. I think it's helpful to know that you can identify these kind of precursors to lucidity, and they are valuable. They're not a failure. They're actually a success.
That's great. Thank you for that. and I don't think you are rambling too much. Pretty cool information. Red, you can go on ahead.
Yes. I don't know, I'm just listening to everyone's views on it. Like, I guess my views on lucidity is like, I usually see it as just a binary of do you know it's a dream or not? But yeah, on all the awareness stuff and the different levels of it, I think it's fun to like, try to see where you are, try to see how far you can go. But, just especially for more beginners, like it's important to be able to accept that even, if you're railed or, if, you seem to have less awareness, less control, all that, whatever stuff, like it's still lucid. So it's worth celebrating. But, at least there's more that you can look forward to.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, nice thought there. Nightel, you can go ahead.
Okay, I would just like to first say that I guess I've been missing out on this lingo. Railed is my new favorite word, and I would also agree that it quite possibly might be my favorite type of lucid. Um, I've heard Amina sort of reference this before as well, with like being a conscious observer in the dream, and I think there's some real work to be done there from a dream analysis perspective. But yeah, all great thoughts. I think we all pretty much agree that it is a scale. Although it sounds like Red thinks it is binary as well. But it made me think about the original question about like what is binary. And I'm no mathematician, but from my very limited understanding, binary code can represent complex bits of information based on the context. So whereas like Skyfall said earlier, the dimmer switch might be like the perfect analogy, or something like the difference between sunrise and sunset, like a more natural metaphor. um, you can tell the difference between the sun being up and the sun being down, and depending on the weather, kind of like a metaphor for consciousness. Sometimes our mind is clear and bright, right? Lucidity not necessarily being exclusive to dreams. Um, we can also feel cloudy or distracted, stressed. You know, that's sort of like my opinion of lucidity, and how your daytime awareness sort of is reflected in your sleep also.
That's cool. Thanks. Strifle?
So yeah, I want to get back to the continuum that DJ was getting at, and what I take issue with is a couple things. Well, mainly the terms. So sublucid, semilucid, those are still lucid, and I would include those as basically as synonyms for prelucid. And I would probably define it as prelucid, low awareness lucid, moderate awareness lucid, high awareness lucid. That's how I describe it. And I don't like anyone attempting to define lucidity by how you choose to respond to it, because that is ultimately an independent action and not necessarily dependent on how aware you are. You could be really aware of the dream and choose to go along with the dream plot because you want to. That's not a reflection of how much awareness you have. That's a reflection oftentimes of an individual choice. You're doing something because you find it enjoyable, or because you find some purpose in it, or you want to do that. You do something because you want to. You say the same thing about performing dream goals and diverting from the plot of the dream. You do that because you want to as well. But it's ultimately, there's some of that gets down to individual choice, and I don't think that's a good metric to use to say, hey, this determines the fact that, okay, because you didn't do something that's different from the dream plot, that's a lower awareness lucid dream. I don't think that's fair. And so I do take issue with some of that, and including control anywhere at all. It's like saying someone who's, I'm trying to think of something analogous, but basically someone, you add in a completely separate skill that works off of different fundamentals, and basically say, oh, if you are or aren't good at doing this thing, or any permutation or variation thereof, then suddenly that means you have a lower awareness in your lucid dream. That's not necessarily true. And so, yeah, I think it's good to I do think the actual awareness aspects are useful. I don't like the terminology. I think it should be reworded, and a bit more expressive of the fact that yes, in those states you are actually lucid. You're just not like at a high level of awareness, and that awareness in things like control and volition, like there's volition is like the opportunity, your ability to choose things. And control is a completely separate skill, and then whether or not you choose to do something is divorced from the actual awareness that you have, because that could be something that's purely up to individual choice, and I don't think that's fair to have that as part of the definition of awareness there.
Well, something I think is worth pointing out is that like the thing behind Rails is that it's not only that you're following the story, like that's not the main thing. It's just that you don't have the awareness to do what you actually would want to do, so that anyone, even if they have goals, would end up following the plot because they're pretty much like a dream character. They don't really think that much, even if they know it's a dream. So yeah, like if you just follow the plot because you like doing that, and when you wake up, you're happy that you follow the plot, that isn't being on Rails. It's on Rails if you want to do a goal, you end up lucid, and then in the dream, you forget about the goal, you just do everything, and you wake up thinking, how'd I forget? And, why didn't I, react the way I would have if I was lucid? Like, so that's more what Rails means. It doesn't mean just following plots, even if you want to. That's not what it means. Just clarifying that.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of something like when we're talking about lucid dreams, kind of just the language of it. It kind of suggests like the entire dream, and like we all tend to get lucid at certain points in the dream. And when I think about like pre-lucid or semi-lucid dreams, I think about like I'll have these little sparks, kind of thing, or flashes. You could think of them that way, where I'll know it's a dream, and this will happen often, where I'll know it's a dream, and then I'll just decide to let the dream keep going. So those are interesting to me because there seems to be these moments of choice where you can choose to become more lucid or not. And yeah, I mean, there does seem to be for most people, I think, especially newer people, the goal is typically control, in that their purpose for getting lucid is to do a particular thing. And so that it's like I'm getting lucid to make this happen, which is like, and that's probably why lucid dreaming is so associated with control, because it's like, well, you can do anything in your dreams. But there there is that interesting thing where lucidity can come and go in a single dream. Yeah, it's just wanted to bring that up as well, where you'll have different levels of lucidity just in a single dream. And there are a number of criteria out there. Like Ed Kellogg's is one, Paul Tholi's is one. You can go look at that book I mentioned for others. Rhys Jones has one. There's several different types, whatever formulations that people have put together, based on how. My guess is it's based on how they're experiencing it, right? And they're based on their goals, who they are, what they think is necessary. Paul Tholi, for example, is much more, in my opinion, more strict. So his is like, it's got to include awareness of the dream state, the capacity to make decisions within the dream, awareness of memory, like recalling waking life, awareness of the self-reflection within the dream, awareness of the dream environment, awareness of the meaning of the dream, awareness of concentration and focus, the ability to maintain lucidity. So I think for most of us, we would say, well, the first one, awareness of the dream, that's lucidity, and all the rest of it is like icing on the cake. Whereas maybe some others would prefer to look at a more they want all those different aspects together happening at once. But sometimes maybe you need to choose to exercise those aspects. And another aspect of this is it's recalling where you were at that moment in the dream, your mindset at that moment. Are all the choices in front of you? Are you really thinking about all these different things? Probably not. You know, typically we make choices pretty automatically based on a whole number of factors. So I think very few lucid dreams that any of us have include all of the aspects of lucidity in any of these continuums or criteria.
That's great to hear. Thanks. Yeah, there are definitely many different ways to see it with different definitions and such. I think as well, you bring up memory just as one of the potential sort of criteria which to go into lucidity. I think that memory is a big debate on, how big it is, how big of a role it plays in lucidity. So we should definitely go further into that, just mentioning. But yeah, who has something to comment on this then? Amina, maybe? I don't know, you were mentioning earlier.
Oh yeah, I didn't know if Night Owl was gonna go first, but yeah, I love what was just said because it really just kind of reiterating that the basic criteria of lucidity is the awareness of knowing it's a dream, and then all these other factors, which is why I use this sliding scale, what do you call those, the mixer boards, as the icon here, because there's a lot of other factors that go together to make it a stronger lucid dream. But if I'm aware that it's a dream, whether or not I can control the dream, I still know that it's a dream, and I consider that lucid by definition. And then when I consider my dreams fully lucid with full dream control and full memory of dream control, it's stable, I'm in the dream, I have full memory of my waking life down to what time I went to bed and what I ate for dinner and what I'm going to do tomorrow, and then in that case all of these sliding scales would be at higher levels. And then there's other aspects to it as well. And yeah, that varies within the same dream. So lucid dreaming, as we know, is a learnable skill. And dream control is as well. It's another skill that I would say is like parallel or complementary to, and it makes the lucid dreams more interesting, more powerful, deeper, whatever, depending on your scale. But like it was said earlier, you can still have an amazing lucid dream even without being able to control the dream. But yeah, you can practice and get better at all the what do you call them, supplementary skills within lucid dreaming. So yeah.
That's cool, thanks. Skyfall, do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, I'll do a backflip right off into the deep end, but no, yeah. So yeah, there are different aspects of lucidity for sure, and different things. I think the primary definition still stands. It's just nuanced in how you approach actually getting there, and that's why I think it's both a binary and a spectrum, because there is that ultimate, like, how much awareness constitutes lucidity, but does it constitute lucidity or does it not? And so you're asking yourself a question with a binary answer, because even if you were pre-lucid, so you didn't quite realize you were dreaming, the answer is no. if you low awareness lucid and you did realize that you were dreaming, but just very briefly, and even if you didn't do too much with it, the answer would still be yes, that you became lucid. And so it is a spectrum that has this sort of binary component, because the question that you typically ask, am I, like, say you ask that question, am I dreaming, for example, if you're doing a state test, it's a question that has a binary answer. You either are dreaming or you aren't dreaming. And so you either know that you're dreaming or you don't know that you're dreaming. But how much you know, whether or not you know that you're dreaming, how much you know, how aware of the situation you're in, can vary quite vastly between full obliviousness to full lucidity. And yeah, I think it's good to acknowledge kind of the dual nature of that. You, on the one hand, you do have this binary question, this "Am I dreaming?" question, this sort of critical question, the "Was I lucid?" question, yes or no. And on the other side, you have, okay, well, how aware was I exactly? Like, was I lucid? And you think about just the amount of awareness that you have in a given dream. Did you ever know it was a dream? Like, how much did you know? What did you do with it? And so I feel like you really do have the elements of both there, and you can't dismiss either, really. And so while on one hand lucidity is a binary yes or no, you either are or aren't, it is the spectrum of this awareness and this memory access that we talked about. And on the other hand, while it is a spectrum of this memory access and awareness, there is a point where you aren't lucid, there is a point where you are lucid. And yeah, there is a line there that you do or don't cross at some point.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's a nice thought. Nightel, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I've heard a lot of people talking about control as like maybe one of the knobs, on the Lucidity soundboard we got going on here. But I also like to think of it as like three C's, just to very, you know, simplify things. And that's control being one of them, consciousness, meaning lucidity, maybe even memory in a way, and then clarity, I would argue, is another big component. And I think starting with clarity, it's all about um, your vividness of the dream, uh, which perhaps can be trained through dream recall specifically, like attention to detail almost. And that in and of itself can be a sliding scale. How do you measure that, right? Perhaps if you make everybody use the same language, you can measure it in word length, page number, even depending on how deep people go. Um, but yeah, I think clarity in and of itself is one of those things that's independent of lucidity or consciousness. And then control is also one of those other independent variables, which again I know all too well with nightmares, which kind of leads me to my next point. When you're like in the heat of the moment, or maybe some would say on rails, you kind of get sucked into the plot of the dream, and one may even say hypervigilant, like stuck living in the now, like really uh, hyper aware of what's going on, and not necessarily living in alignment with your subconscious mind, which I think is an essential part of maintaining lucidity. It's not really, commanding control, but sort of living in the flow, if that makes any sense. I did hear DJ talk a little bit more eloquently than I just put it about illusory form and some of the implications there. So maybe DJ could dive a little bit deeper into that category.
Yeah, that's more like lucidity while you're awake, right? Which I think you mentioned earlier, which I thought was interesting. And that's a big subject as well. It's almost easier to know, it's easier to identify lucidity in dreams than it is in waking. Because we say, like, in a lucid dream, it's a dream, but when you're awake? Do you know it's a dream? What does that even mean? So that's a bit more complicated. The basic idea there would be that you everything we're experiencing is not what is real. Our brain, it's probably one of its main functions is to eliminate inputs, to reduce inputs, and filter them and reinterpret them. So what we're getting isn't really the actual thing, it's our brain's interpretation of it. So in that respect, our waking experience is a projection of the real versus actually the real. And lots of Matrix references could be had there. Um, but that's kind of the underlying concept of, in my mind, of illusory form. Technically it's part of a larger system in Tibetan Buddhism, which involves a lot of other words that would mean nothing to 90% of the audience. So that's a rabbit hole. But the idea is that we live our lives mostly automatically. We learned how to walk when we were little kids. We don't think about how to walk unless you have a disability. Usually you never think about it. Or if you're doing some kind of athletic activity, something like that, we learned it a long time ago, and then we just never think about it again. And that's kind of how we do the most of our life. We learn how to do something, and then it becomes automatic, more automated. And so the idea of the illusory form is to kind of deconstruct all of that automated process. And as you do that, you become more aware of underlying processes. You might become more aware, and this is also related to meditation. You might become more aware of your thought processes, your emotional processes. You could imagine that doing that would give you more, like in waking life, it's like the practice allowed me to identify the arising of certain emotions or moods or thoughts much earlier. Most of us, I think, we experience emotions and we don't really reflect. I think most people don't rarely self-reflect. But we do have the ability to actually know when something is about to happen in our mind, in our brain. When we're about to feel something, we can know when it's arising as it's happening. Whereas most of the time in people's lives, we don't really have any awareness of that until after the fact, usually long after the fact. So in that respect, it kind of gives you a window into waking lucidity, where you're seeing these aspects of your consciousness and you're becoming more aware of them. And that can translate to dreams. It's hard to draw direct correlations, but yeah, that's kind of the basics on that. I think it's, like I said, I think it's even more difficult to identify waking, what we might call lucidity. Oftentimes that gets more into spiritual domains because, and there's a ton of science on this, but it's very little known. Not much of it is known. Long-term meditators have more gray matter. They spend more time in gamma brain waves, which is like the higher frequency. So there's a lot of science that's been done, but again, it's all correlations, right? There's no, oh, this is it. You can say, oh yeah, this part of the brain is lighting up. Like I've been researching as we're talking the different brain regions that are shown, because Skyfall mentioned fMRI, so I was curious. I've read Baird's I think it was neurophysiological correlates or something like that to lucid dreaming. And he's done some great studies, and it's like, okay, these parts of the brain light up. Don't really know what that means. Seems important. Prefrontal cortex, the language centers, the emotional centers, the visual centers, all these things are lighting up and much more active. But then they go in and shock those particular, give it a little electric nudge, and nothing happens. Right? It doesn't cause lucidity. So very, very tricky to pin down where it's coming from, what's actually happening.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I think we sort of went a bit into the scientific and spiritual side at the same time, which is always the best part of this topic. Skyfollow, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, this talking about like TCS, the transcranial stimulation, which is they have attempted to use, not really seen much results with. And yeah, Benjamin Baird and Dr. LaBerge actually were doing a study, or not what I said we're doing. They did a study several years ago. In fact, they presented it at the 2022 ISD conference, and that was the one that sort of disproved the one from, I think, 2013 or something, that it's claimed that lucid dreaming happened in sort of a 30, like a gamma hertz range of EEG frequencies, and they were failing to sort of account for the eye movement artifacts for REMs. And when you accounted for the artifacts that were generated from eye movements, that wasn't really seen. And so that, I think the conclusions that we're really getting to is we don't really know what causes it yet. We don't know exactly, what or how to, how it's caused in the brain right now. So they're still at that point. It's still unknown, where that's gone. It's kind of cool. They're still looking for the answer, but they haven't found it yet. And it'll be very interesting if and when they do actually find what that answer is. And everyone goes quiet.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
I don't want to like just monopolize the conversation, but it's like I think of qualia, I think of artificial general intelligence, I think of the combination of what is it, more than the sum of the parts, where when you put together a number of things, you get something totally different than just the variables that you've entered in, where all these different regions of the brain are functioning together, but what are they creating together? It's not just a binary like it's not code of zeros and ones. It's something, it's like everything's working in concert to create this different thing. That would be my theory, at least. Like that, I think that's probably where lucidity is coming from. The metacognition is another aspect, or approach that you can take to think about how this works. Studies that have been done on metacognition. Basically, metacognition is being aware of your own cognition, your thought processes. And so metacognition is closely related to lucid dreaming because it's this self-awareness of your own cognitive processes. And I think probably understanding this stuff can help you with, at least in your daytime practices, maybe understand a little better. I've kind of developed my own sort of outlook on that, maybe adjusted my techniques a little bit based on that. But yeah, we've got like a lot of really, really great material on what lucid dreaming is and what happens. But yeah, definitely no. So that, I think that's kind of makes it tough to say like what is and isn't a lucid dream, because you can't just reduce it down to cause and effect yet. And I think it's also in that sense related to the overall problem of consciousness, which is the hard problem. And I think I'm I'm somebody who's skeptical about discovering that, because I think it's just so baked into the fabric of the universe and reality that we're going to need to know a lot more about everything in order to understand how our brain works. Yeah.
Yeah, true. Does anyone have any thoughts on this one? You can wade in to play on Skyfall's jerk of diving in. I'm just gonna say, okay, I'm gonna call on people if no one's gonna say anything. Okay, who has spoken the least? Red, do you have any thoughts to add to this? I'm putting you on the spot here. I'm not even sure if you're back yet. Alternatively,
It's the classroom teacher now.
We can
she's
also
the teacher.
answer some questions from the chat too.
Yeah.
Yes, if no one has anything to add to this topic, I was trying to get the topic to go. But yeah,
I was gonna say
is there a difference?
It's 2:51, so yeah, it might be good if we're to move into Q&A. I think if there are people watching who want to get in.
Yeah, sure. We can try and make the session an hour. It's kind of funny to me because like we have more people in this session than we had in the last one, and yet it feels like people are talking less in this session than the last one, which might say something. Because I probably will be changing the format a little in the future. But yeah, we can take questions. I mean, you had one on the screen, but then yeah. So from is it literally from Instagram or from someone called Insta?
It's from Instagram.
Okay, cool. From Instagram, is there a difference between awareness and lucidity?
Yes, the Lucid Journal commented. What do you guys think?
Does anyone want to kick this off, or should I just jump?
Because awareness can be awareness of anything, and lucidity is specifically awareness of the fact that you are dreaming. Lucidity is a certain type of awareness. It's an awareness of a thing. You can be aware in your dreams, for example, of the experiences that you're having, but not aware of the fact that you're dreaming. You're aware of something, but you're not lucid. So it's not just awareness, it's the awareness of the thing, and the thing being the dream, awareness of the fact that you are dreaming. And so it's like squares and rectangles. All squares are rectangles. Lucidity is awareness of the fact that you're dreaming, but not all awareness is lucidity.
Exactly. Well said. And that's why I like the term lucid awareness, because it really puts both words together. But awareness, really, mindful awareness is kind of like the basis of a lucid dream. But yeah, like Skyfall said, you can have awareness in your waking life. You can be aware of anything. But having that mindful awareness and that dialogue with yourself of like, am I dreaming right now or not? Which I do in waking life. And I have, I do state tests often. But that does carry over into my dream space for me. And it's funny because in the private chat, Skyfall and I were talking about a state test a second ago. And I wanted to point out too that, so the other day I had a dream where I became lucid simply off of the fact that I did a state test. Like I was completely convinced everything was normal waking life. And then I noticed something was weird. So that was the first trigger, was that pre-lucid of noticing, hey, my closet looks different. And I was like, well, I guess I should just do a state test, which is normally what I do in waking life when I'm like, oh, that's weird. Reality check. And so it was only then when I did the state test that I realized, oh, wow, it reacted in a dream way. So I'm dreaming. But for a second, I was like so convinced that I had to like double check. I was like, am I really dreaming? Like, that's so weird. I was so convinced. But then I had that confidence of like, yes, I'm lucid. And then the lucid dream progressed from there. When I don't have that confidence and I kind of doubt myself, then it's harder for me to establish the lucid awareness, which doesn't happen as often, but I know a lot of people have that problem. So that's kind of a tangent of the question, but I feel like Skyfall answered it pretty well.
I mean, you guys have heard of reality checks and state tests. Have you heard about the state taste?
What is that?
The state taste? You haven't heard of that? It's where you become lucid, and the first thing you do is like you have to go like lick your walls or the
I do
carpet
that all the time,
or
actually.
something.
Yeah, and I'm always so shocked that
Wait, is that a
carpet
real
is
term? I thought we
nasty,
just
like
made it up as a joke.
I
I
Well,
thought
I've
it
never
had
think
like
he
an
did.
actual
but I do
meaning
that
attached.
actually.
That means you got to do it in waking life too, right?
Sounds like
I
something
only
Vinny
do it when I'm
came up with.
100% sure it's a dream. I'm like, okay, might as well lick the floor.
Okay, if I do it, if I become aware now, regardless, I'm gonna lick my walls.
Okay.
Yeah, walking through a subway station, like, you know, you get down to like the platform and it's like 11:30 at night. I think I might be dreaming. Time to lick the floor.
That would explain a lot of the people that you find in places like that. Anyway, okay, so state taste explained. I'm definitely going to be adding that to the dictionary now.
They've got a little.
Should we
little
move on
something there.
to
Yeah. So I just wanted to add there that there's so many different aspects to awareness, but I think every aspect of it can lead to lucidity. Whether it's, you know, a passive awareness and a direct attentional memory, body, really anything. You know, if you've been in the lucid dreaming community for a while, and people figure out a way to use just about every aspect of awareness to get lucid. And it seems like for some people, they find a particular aspect of it that works better for them. You know, like Robert Wagner has that interview with um, the person who was saying that they learned how to have regular lucids by thinking about where they've been in the past 15 minutes. So, you know, using memory, or you have our friend Hukif who uses the gravity reality check, right? It's like these different aspects of awareness can be used. So, yeah, just wanted to add that. Y'all already covered pretty much everything, I think, on the definition side. But yeah, awareness is like such a broad topic. It can be easy to misunderstand. But if you find a certain aspect of it that really helps you, you know, like the all day awareness kind of thing, the King Yoshi technique, a lot of people found that useful. There was a lot of feedback from that where some people found a particular way of doing it was more useful for them, or focusing on a certain part of their surroundings that was more useful for them. So for whatever reason, there's like certain aspects of awareness that people seem to resonate with that are more effective at kind of guiding them or leading them to lucidity.
Yeah, nice thought. Does anyone else have something to add to this question, or should we move on to another one? I don't know if we have many others either, but Amina, do we have others?
I pretty much answered the question. There were some other questions as we were talking, but we kind of already answered them, like defining dream control and that kind of stuff. Everything else was just comments.
Yeah, cool. Okay, well, it's almost the top of the hour. We could wrap up if we feel as though there isn't.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm wondering if people associate when they get lucid with a feeling.
Yes.
So it would be really cool to dive into that a little bit, because we talk about knowing, but I think for me at least, getting lucid is completely intertwined with a feeling. Sometimes, and I describe it a whole bunch of different ways because there isn't really any words that can apply. You know, it's the light bulb that comes on. I think to break it down the most, I think it's like a contrast, like going from a warm room into to cold outside, or you know, eating something tangy or spicy. You know, it's like a strong contrast between one thing and another. yeah, curious what others.
I'd describe it as like, for those like moderate to high level lucids, I describe it as a feeling of there-ness, of sort of being in that situation, knowing what it is, and re-examining it in a new light. In that kind of a sense is probably how I describe it.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because it is kind of like for me a combination of like a feeling and a knowing. And it's like I think the more lucid dreams you have, the more you begin to recognize what it feels like to be lucid, and and like what the dream state essentially feels like. And so because of that, I mean, I've been lucid dreaming for a long time, so like I've been able to recognize it, and sometimes I'll just automatically be lucid right away just because I'm like, oh, I know it's a dream. Looking around at the environment and stuff. And I think even that feeling is combined with other things, like memory and all the other lucid dreaming skills. But it's hard to describe that feeling. It's like something in my heart where I'm standing in the dream and I just know. Um, and I know because I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize that feeling. This is a dream. So yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
It kind of leads me to another thought where we talk a lot about the difference between waking and dreaming in order to trigger a lucid. But I personally find that focusing on the difference between a non-lucid and a lucid is really helpful as well. I mean, for me, I think it's more helpful. Where it's like when you become familiar enough with the difference between dreams and waking, then there's another aspect there of experiencing a non-lucid versus a lucid dream, and all of the whole spectrum between those two. I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, I think the difference between a non-lucid dream and a lucid dream for me is far greater than the difference between right now waking reality and a lucid dream. Those are more similar, in my opinion, to me, based on the feeling that I'm in. A non-lucid dream is like just very different. But I don't know if this is kind of what you're talking to, but
Point of personal privilege, Amina, you are cutting in and out a little bit. We just lost contact with you
Yes.
completely.
Okay, wondering if that was me.
No, that was Amina.
Same. I also
First, your microphone kind of cut in and out a bit, and then we lost you completely.
All right. Well, regardless, do we have like any comments on that, or even
Can
though
you
it was
guys
unfinished?
We can hear you now.
Hi.
Oh, hey. Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but I don't know what you guys heard, but I was talking about how like
See, it just faded again. As soon
what
as said, I don't
the
know what you
heck?
guys heard. The volume went down on it.
That's so weird. Okay, let me figure this out.
Well, I had a bit of a follow-up there too. If anybody's felt their like that feeling of lucidity or that experience of lucidity in waking life, and kind of what context that was in. I have a theory that everybody has experienced that in some kind of peak state, flow state. Just curious if anybody has thoughts on that.
I definitely have. Hopefully my microphone works. I don't know what's going
Yep.
on. Let me know if it cuts out again and I'll try to reset it. But yeah, I definitely have. And like I'll even do it intentionally too. Like when I do my state tests or reality checks, I'll have that moment of like mindful lucidity. And I'll really test things out and sometimes even like pretend like I'm lucid kind of just to kind of prepare for that feeling of like what I would do right now if I was in a lucid dream. Um, And then I just also have just those beautiful, very mindful moments where everything feels dreamlike. And that's why I was saying earlier that like my waking life mindfulness feels closer to a lucid dream than a lucid dream feels close to a non-lucid dream, if that makes sense. Like the non-lucid dream is more different than the waking and the lucid dream state. And what I was trying to say earlier before my mic cut off was that sometimes I'll do this exercise where I'll look back at my dream journal of my non-lucids and I'll try to like rewrite the dream kind of like from that point of awareness where I should have become lucid, like maybe a dream sign that I missed or something that should have definitely tipped me off, but didn't. And then if I had become lucid in that moment, what would I have done? And that exercise has helped me a lot. And I do it in waking life too. Like if I was lucid right now, what would I do? Would I continue here? Would I go fly away? Whatever, you know? So kind of that mindful planning kind of has helped me a lot.
I would say for me, I don't really do state testing as a day practice. I don't really do that much, but I kind of see a little bit of maybe what you're talking about there. I don't really think I get that same necessarily quote unquote feeling while awake. For me, it's I don't I get an emotional response when I get lucid, usually elation of some sort or satisfaction. But I don't know if I would equate it necessarily with a feeling per se of more of a aha, yes, here it is kind of thing. I think I treat that just a little bit differently. But aside from that, I don't really have any other comments to add to that. Night Owl, you've been very quiet. Do you have anything to add?
I was going to say it kind of relates to what Night Owl was talking about, daytime lucidity.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you asked the question, actually, I felt like this rush of elation, that we were turning the topic back on ourselves again, and it was a nice little reminder to be present in the moment and sort of like just check in, and it feels very much like awakening within the dream. It's sort of like checking in with where you're at, what you're doing, who you're with. What are you headed towards? Where are you coming from? And maybe to some extent you become desensitized when you think about these things too abstract. And um, I've heard you before reference DJ something along the lines of training your subconscious mind to sort of like come to that realization without forcing it as much. And I still think that's something I'm grappling with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know if you all have heard of the term Jesus smuggling. It's from the internet sphere, but it's like when people talk, like Christians will try to evangelize through like sort of talking about the religion without saying the actual words. And that's basically what I was doing there, except with like dream yoga, Tibetan Buddhist stuff. And the thing is like, I don't think people really realize how rooted the Western lucid dreaming, um, just the progression of it. Like LaBerge was very inspired by a dream yoga lama. There's a lot of deep knowledge and wisdom that comes from that tradition. And so when I talk about programming the subconscious, the Buddhists will have their own terminology for it, but it's kind of, I think about the determinists, specifically like Daniel Dennett uses a study that showed that the brain, the decision mechanisms of the brain happen before we consciously perceive the choice happening. So we think we're making a free will choice, right? And there's our argument against free will. But in the brain, the neurological correlates of that choice are happening before we're consciously aware of it. And so to me, you can argue against it just on that, but to me, it indicates that our unconscious or subconscious mind is really the one in control, and that we can condition it or change it consciously, but in the moment, it's the unconscious and subconscious that's really in control, and calling the shots, because there's so much happening. I don't think our conscious mind can handle it. I think our conscious mind is this little dude in like the top of the Enterprise. I'm a bit of a Star Trek fan, but it's like this little bubble on the top of this massive ship, and it controls it can control all these things, but the whole ship is this amalgamation of processes that are just happening.
Which
And everything.
Enterprise, by the way?
Yeah, that's the mark of a true Star Trek.
Because I'm a real Star
fan
Trek
right
fan.
there.
Yeah.
My sister can like actually name the numbers and everything. I'm not
NPC
that.
1701
Yeah.
-B is the cards. That's my favorite one, probably.
Yeah, I'm not that. I'm watching TNG with my nephew, so thinking
Yep,
of
that's
that
the
one.
Galaxy class. Yep, that's the D.
Yeah, so you have like this massive ship and everybody's trained to do their job based on, whatever's happening, but then at the very top you have the executive function, right? But, in a situation where things are happening so fast, the whole system is going to respond automatically, no matter what the executive functioning person is, or aspect, or whatever you want to call it, is saying. So in that aspect, Night Owl, it's like there's particular aspects of awareness that you can train, and you can do that consciously, and then over time it just becomes automatic, right? And you can think of it as building a schema, you can think of it as building habits, whatever you want to call it. And over time, and specifically like dream yoga, the Tibetan yogas of dream and sleep, Tenzin Wangyal calls it effortful awareness, natural awareness, and ultimate awareness. And so effortful, you got to put a little effort, you got to set an alarm, all this stuff. Natural, it starts happening on its own a little bit, but you still got to push it. And then ultimate, it's all happening on its own. And we might call that omni, right? So yeah, it's good stuff.
Cool. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
For sure, I would maybe say eventually Wu Wei, hopefully, but yeah, I love the Eastern meets Western approach. Even so much so, thought about incorporating that, Eastern versus Western zodiac into a UID for these online research studies. And I think we decided that the Reddit random username would be the ultimate choice. But anyway, I digress. Thank you.
Yeah, I know a lot of people kind of dog on the ADA, all day awareness, but it's really the ground floor of that, training your subconscious or unconscious to be kind of automatically aware. So just plugging that.
Yes,
By
I've
the
always
way,
personally said. Yeah.
sorry. By the way, that technique was derived from a guide that Naya wrote. Naya is well known in the community, mild guide.
Yes.
And the particular aspect that King Yoshi got that from, Naya based it on, you guessed it, dream yoga, seeing reality as an illusion. I think a lot of Westerners don't like that word because they think, oh, it means it's fake. No, it doesn't mean it's fake. It just means that what we're experiencing is not what actually is. So, yeah, I mean that just bringing it back to the topic, that can be very helpful in knowing what lucidity actually is.
Well, I guess my perception of the time isn't what it really is, because well, it's just a interpretation of a model based on an electronic voice that is translated into electrical impulses in my brain. But it says that it's 1/4 past the hour. So do we want to wrap up? Do we want to keep going? What do we want to do?
The very, very consistent and reliable model. Yes.
Good question. It is indeed the 1/4 past the hour, and we have gone in so many directions with this topic. I mean, originally we said that we were just going to take some questions and then wrap up at the top of the hour. I'm fine with if we want to keep talking, but like, do we have any other questions, Amina, or is that it for now?
That's it for now. I mean, I'll verbally invite anybody that has any specific questions to comment them now, but no questions, just great comments and great engagement, but no questions.
Great. Yeah, no, I'm going to take this moment to pause to call to action to subscribe to the Lucid Dreaming Initiative YouTube channel so that we can stream on there when we have enough subscribers. LD Initiative, yes, that is the how do you say it, like the tag or whatever, I don't know. So yeah, I don't know, we've been through a lot. Does anyone have any closing thoughts or like things that they want to add at this point?
I just say to remind everyone to wake up to the life of your dreams, and to thank everyone for watching. On behalf of all of us here, this has been awesome. So thank you guys so much for coming, DJ, Red, everybody, of course, Amina, Night Owl, Crystal, everybody. Thank you so much. This has been fun.
Yes, thanks everybody. It's been amazing. I do love this topic. And I just want to encourage everybody to continue to just help us dispel the misconceptions online of people confusing lucidity with dream control and all these different aspects of it. So yeah, definitely follow and join the community and tune in for the next one.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you all for coming, amazing panelists, and thank you everyone for watching as well. So
my last word would just be to find your own way. There's a lot of ways to lucidity. Figure it out.
Yes, that is key.
Good. Wise words.
Mm-hmm. And mild rules, but yes, definitely be sure to find something that works for you. And in Sensei's words, once you find something that works well for you, spam it.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice. And fully combined. I'm gonna keep pushing that forever. It's like half of a meme, but like at the same time, it's pretty good. So yeah. All right, then I think this can be it. Are we still live? I think we are.